In this broad belt of unconsciousness, which is immune to conscious criticism and control, we stand defenseless, open to all kinds of influences and psychic infections. As with all dangers, we can guard against the risk of psychic infection only when we know what is attacking us, how, where, and when the attack will come. Since self-knowledge is a matter of getting to know the individual facts, theories help very little in this respect. For more a theory lays claim to universal validity, the less capable it is of doing justice to the individual facts. Any theory based on experience is necessarily statistical, and that is to say, it formulates an ideal average which abolishes all exceptions at either end of the scale and replaces them by an abstract mean. This means is quite valid, though it is not necessarily occur in reality. Despite this, it figures in the theory as an unassailable fundamental fact. The exceptions at either extreme, though equally factual, do not appear at the final result at all, since they cancel each other out. If, for instance, I determine the weight of each stone in a bed of pebbles and get an average weight of 145 grams, this tells me very little about the real nature of the pebbles. Anyone who thought, on the basis of these findings, that he could pick up a pebble of 145 grams at the first try would be in for a serious disappointment. Indeed, it might well happen that however long he searched, he would not find a single pebble weighing exactly 145 grams. The statistical method shows facts in light of the ideal average, but does not give us a picture of their empirical reality. While reflecting an indisputable aspect of reality, it can falsify the actual truth in a most misleading way. This is particularly true of theories which are based on statistics. The distinctive thing about real facts, however, is their individuality. Not to put too fine a point on it, one could say that the real picture consists of nothing but exceptions to the rule, and that in consequence, absolute reality has predominantly the character of irregularity. These considerations must be borne in mind whenever there is talk of a theory serving as a guide to self-knowledge. There is and can be no self-knowledge based on theoretical assumptions, for the object of self-knowledge is an individual, a relative exception, and an irregular phenomenon. Hence, it is not the universal and the regular that characterize the individual, but rather the unique. He is not to be understood as a recurrent unit, but as something unique and singular, which is, in the last analysis, can neither be known nor compared with anything else. At the same time, man, as a member of a species, can and must be described as a statistical unit. Otherwise, nothing general could be said about him. For this purpose, he has to be regarded as a comparative unit. This results in a universally valid anthropology or psychology, as the case may be, with an abstract picture of a man as an average unit from which all individual features have been removed. But it is precisely these features which are paramount importance for understanding man. If I was to understand an individual human being, I must lay aside all scientific knowledge of the average man and discard all theories in order to adopt a completely new and unprejudiced attitude. I can only task the understanding with a free and open mind, whereas knowledge of the man or insight into human character presupposes all sorts of knowledge about mankind in general. Now, whether it is a question of understanding a human being or of self-knowledge, I must in both cases leave all theoretical assumptions behind me. Since scientific knowledge not only enjoys universal esteem, but in the eyes of modern man, counts only in the intellectual and spiritual authority, understanding the individual obliges me to commit, to turn a blind eye to scientific knowledge. This is a sacrifice not lightly made, for the scientific attitude cannot rid itself so easily of its sense of responsibility. And if the psychologist happens to be a doctor who not only wants to classify his patient scientifically, but also to understand him as a human being, he is threatened with conflict of duties between the two diametrically opposed and mutually exclusive attitudes of knowledge on the one hand and understanding on the other. This conflict cannot be solved by either or, but only by a kind of two-way thinking, doing one thing while not losing sight of the other. In fact, in view of that in the principle, the positive advantages of knowledge work specifically to the disadvantage of understanding. The judgment resulting therefrom is likely to be something of a paradox. Judged scientifically, the individual is nothing but a unit which repeats itself ad infinitum and could just as well be designated with a letter of the alphabet. For understanding, on the other hand, it is just the unique individual human being who, when stripped of all conformities and regularities, so dear to the heart of the scientist, is the supreme and only real object of investigation. The doctor, above all, should be aware of this contradiction. On the one hand, he is equipped with the statistical truths on his scientific training, and on the other hand, he is faced with the task of treating a sick person who, especially in the care of psychic suffering, requires individual understanding. The more schematic the treatment, the more resistances quite rightly calls up in the patient, and the more the cure is jeopardized. The psychotherapist sees himself compelled, willy-nilly, to regard the individuality of a patient as an essential fact in the picture, and to arrange his methods of treatment accordingly. Today, over the field of medicine, it is recognized that the task of the doctor consists in treating the sick person, not an abstract illness. This illustration in the case of medicine is only a special instance of the problem of education and training in general. Scientific education is based on the main on statistical truths and abstract knowledge, and therefore imparts an unrealistic, rational picture in the world, and in which the individual as a merely marginal phenomenon plays no role. The individual, however, as an irrational datum, is the true and authentic carrier of reality, the concrete man as opposed to the unreal ideal or normal man to whom scientific statements refer. What is more, most of the natural sciences try to represent the results of their investigations as though these have come into existence without man's intervention, in such a way that the collaboration of the psyche, an indispensable factor, remains invisible. An exception to this is modern physics, which recognizes that the observed is not independent of the observer. So in this respect too, science conveys a picture of the world from which a human psyche appears to be excluded, the very antithesis of the humanities.